welcome to the Way Outside the Nest podcast. I am your host, Hollywood J, with so much to say. Whew. Let's start the show.
Yeah, I got to ask. Anything new with the knee? Feel better? Feel worse?
Break yourself, fool!
Okay, that's what I thought. Thanks. It's worth a shot.
What? You ain't got nothing, man?
On this episode is a special episode. I brought in my nemesis, the Lex Luthor to my Superman, the Joker to my Batman, the Bane to... whatever, you get it. I feel like Elon Musk himself sends me his tweets just to see if I bite. And here we are, years later, sitting down having a discussion like grown men about the Eagles. We got Ian on the podcast. Now, Ian is very, very smart. Very, very smart, actually. Definitely knows his stuff about college. Definitely knows his prospects. We definitely bump heads during draft season, but that's only because he knows his stuff and I know my stuff. That's all. A very knowledgeable Eagles fan. And in this conversation, we talk about Howie Roseman for the first time, Michael Clay for the first time on the podcast. This is going to be a special episode. Tune in. Thank y'all for listening, of course. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Ian. I have Ian on the line here now. Ian, funny story. I've been knowing this guy for probably like 4 or 5 years now. We've been on Twitter back and forth. I sometimes consider him my nemesis, but he's actually more right than wrong 100% of the time. So welcome Ian to the show. Say what up, Ian.
Hey, what's going on, Hollywood J? Nice to be here.
Thank you. Well, it's good to have you, brother. I guess my first question is on the offensive line. I just want to, or not the offensive line, the offense as a whole. What do you consider the bright spots on the offense position-wise?
I think it's pretty clear that this year that the wide receivers have clearly been the bright spot for this team.
And Hurts has a moment. And catch me, Devontae Smith inside the 35 of the first down. Open in the middle of the field to the 15 and another first down for the Eagles. And Smith once again hauls that in. Firing for the end zone and a one-handed attempt. Oh my goodness!
A.J. Brown just under 1,000 yards receiving so far. Devonta Smith clearly is a number 2 in this offense, but still he's put up 482 yards, 3 touchdowns this year, which is just 13 yards less than McLaurin in Washington, with the same amount of TDs. So that's pretty impressive, even with all the weapons the Eagles have on the line. Zaccheaus making his presence felt. I knew coming in, I was really excited when the Eagles picked him up this year in free agency. He's got a touchdown grab against the Buccaneers. He had a big 4th down pickup against the Commanders in the first time he played them. And you can even say Covey has made his presence felt in the return game as a wide receiver as well, being a top 3 returner in this league. So it's pretty impressive to see the offense and the wide receivers make this much of an impact so far.
I like that answer, Ian. Starting off like that. I like it. One person I really haven't talked too much about on this show, surprisingly, is Howie Roseman. So we're going to definitely talk about Howie's moves for the very first time, very first episode. And I'm glad I got Ian for this because he definitely has been watching this for a long time with me. So just one last on the, just kind of in the same realm of things. What do you think the bright spot is on the defensive?
For the defense, I think it's pretty clearly the defensive tackle position. You know, you have Fletcher Cox still playing at a high level after a decade in the league. You have your boy Jordan Davis making a clear impact in season 2 for him, year 2. Milton Williams rotating in, still making his presence felt with the pass rush. And then when Howie makes this clear splash hit of grabbing Jalen Carter at number 9, and he makes an immediate impact, making his presence felt year one. Even with only not even 50% of the snaps to start the season, he's really come on as a star for the Eagles in the making.
How would you rate Howie Roseman's roster as a whole? How would you rate it this year?
If you're going to give it a grade, I think you got to give it about an A- to an A. I know a lot of us Eagles fans hold Howie at a high level because of the moves he's made, the trades he's made in the past. And I think the Eagles are strong offensive line, defensive line. Those are where the games are won. Strong at receiver. I mean, I guess the secondary has some weak spots. Just with the age, Slade's getting a little older, Bradbury's getting a little older, not as athletic as they used to be, able to be on the corners. But I think you have to give him a pretty solid grade, especially with the draft moves he's made, the trades he's made to kind of add pieces to the team as a whole. I think you got to be pretty excited for the Eagles as an Eagles fan, not just this year, but going into the future.
What move, just one move, you would probably do different, or just looks like, in hindsight, was a bad move that Howie Roseman made this past year?
A bad move? Maybe not addressing the linebacking situation as well as he could have. I know a lot of Eagles fans dislike the way Howie picks some of his draft picks, and he tends to go for players that will not start year one if the team is ready. So I think with the Jalen Carter pick, he didn't start right away. He was still throwing out Fletcher and Jordan, getting his time in there. I think a lot of people were hoping for another splash pick next to Nakobe Dean at the linebacking position, and then bringing back Nicholas Morrow to have starters repetitions after cutting him in training camp. I think that was a move a lot of Eagles fans were still questioning. Is there a move where they can actually they could have grabbed the linebacker yesterday for Jordan Hicks to make a big splash play to cover running backs out of the backfield, tight ends across the middle. And that's something where the Eagles do lack a little bit, is in coverage linebackers. So I think that might be the only hit where Howie has not really succeeded in his tenure, especially coming back after his second time as the Eagles GM. But overall, I do think the Eagles have a pretty solid roster all the way around. It's kind of hard to find flaws because you have QB1, you've got an elite wide receiver, you've got an elite offensive line, defensive line, and some pretty solid secondary players as well, even if they're not the best in the league. But it's a nitpick, but maybe coverage linebacker is something that Howie has a little bit of a weakness with.
I definitely agree. We are definitely getting torched somewhere in the middle of the field, and I can't tell what it is. I can't tell if it's the linebackers. I can't tell if it's defense. So I want to go ahead and talk about the coaching then. Let's start from the top and then work down to the bottom. What would you grade Nick Sirianni right now, just based on the 8 games in the season?
I mean, he's got the best record in the league. The team has really good vibes going in. I would absolutely give him an A. I know I sound sort of like I got my midnight green / Kelly green glasses on right now. But I love the way Nick has coached. I know there was a Twitter poll yesterday where people were picking out, who's your coach of the year, and Nick Sirianni is still not getting any love after 2 seasons of being a top team in the league. It's pretty interesting how teams don't respect Sirianni, even though he has this tush-push brotherly shove play that he's invented, and the entire league is trying to catch up and respond to it. And I think that's the mark of a good coach, is when you have something where teams are trying to catch up to you. I think that's really where you should be trying to be as a coach. And if he's succeeding like that, I think we're in a good shape as Eagles fans.
Well, Ian, if I was still using the air horn, I would have air horned the hell out of everything you just said because it sounds great. I do think he's not getting any coaching of the year love, despite having a play that everybody's talking about right now. What do you think about Brian Johnson, his offensive coordinator? What grade are you giving him so far?
I'm going to give him a B+. I think the red zone is obviously an area where everybody focuses on, and it's rightfully so, because as Eagles fans, we should not be more excited when our team's at our own 20 than the opponent's 20-yard line. But he has done pretty well. I saw, a tweet yesterday where the Eagles are 3rd in points first in first down efficiency. And I think just the red zone is where the Eagles have struggled so far. And, I mean, if you consider last week against the Commanders and the second time we played them, they could have easily hit 50 points if they don't fumble the ball inside the 5 twice. So I think he's finding his stride. He's finally letting kind of Jalen do his own thing. He's keeping him more in the pocket, especially with Jalen's knee being banged up. But he's definitely kind of finding his groove. And I think a lot of offensive coordinators need that, is when the first couple of weeks you got to find out what works, what doesn't work. Because training camp, you can mess around and, plays don't really count. But when you're playing the opponents who've been scouting these certain players and plays don't work, you got to kind of change things up. So I do think Brian has kind of found his stride, and that's a good thing going forward, especially as we head into sort of the hard part of the Eagles schedule.
Now, I will say I haven't asked about this at all to any guest, so this is cool to ask this question. How do you feel about Michael Clay?
You got to give him credit. The special teams have been so much better. Last year, they were a clear liability. We saw that in the Super Bowl at least once, probably twice. And obviously, when you're going against Mahomes, it doesn't help when your special teams aren't making any sort of difference. But you got to admit, Covey has been phenomenal compared to the expectations that have come in for this season. A lot of people they used him as like, oh, he's a crash test dummy, just in the backfield, just catching the ball, getting smashed. But he's now making a big dent on, giving the Eagles, great starting field position. Braden Mann has clearly been the best of the punters the Eagles have tried out this year. I know your boy Ringo's made some plays on special teams so far. So I think Michael Clay has finally kind of found a rhythm with his coaching as well. And they've really turned the tide, especially for in close games. The Eagles have been really good in close games, and special teams plays a big factor in that.
That's one person I haven't given a shout out, but I'm starting to think of all those Jake Elliott field goals, and I'm starting to think of Covey and his returns. They've been pretty good this year, so I'm giving him a little shout out today. Now I want to talk more about Sean Desai. I've been praising this guy all season long. Last week was a little iffy. For me. Explain last week. Make it make sense for me that Sean Desai is still cooking, please.
It's hard to argue your sentiment there. He made a lot of us pretty nervous the way that Sam Howell has kind of cooked us up twice this year. But I think, you got to say that Eric Bieniemy has known the Eagles defense very well. And even with the loss of Gannon, which I think has been a positive for a lot of the Eagles, Desai's, we're predicated on getting pass rush. And when you get the ball out quickly and we're sitting kind of back in that zone coverage, letting out route slants kind of cook us up and trying to play for third down and short and get him off the field. And the Commanders were picking it up, for them being, I guess, a bottom 3 offensive line, and the Eagles didn't have any pressures besides the one Jalen Carter had in the first quarter that prevented that Byron Pringle touchdown pass. And the very end with Hassan Reddick getting that sack, essentially on fourth down. That was the true 2 pressures the Eagles had in that game. And that's kind of mystifying because the Eagles generate tons of pressure on pretty much anyone. They left Reed Blankenship on an island, and Howell kind of took him apart. Covering Terry McLaurin is not an easy feat for any cornerback in this league, and he made his presence felt, except for the couple drops at the end of the game where he actually was wide open. And Sam Howell kind of, he gave us a couple gifts there to help the Eagles seal the victory. But overall, Desai, he's had, really good games. I think he's been better inside the red zone than outside of it. If you really watched that Dolphins game, a lot of people gave him a lot of love, a lot of credit. And I kind of rewatched it. The Dolphins were moving the ball quite a bit in the second half and at the end of the first half. And then they kind of stalled out in the red zone. Obviously, the Tua turnover helped. Getting the field goal off the Jalen Hurts turnover helped the defense as well. So he's definitely, enabled this pass rush with some more blitzing than Gannon actually did. I think it was really great. But this weekend is definitely a question mark for him. And I think we do have the right to be like, hey, not our best performance. Find a way to slow down this quick passing game and get that pass rush going again.
So I guess it's the perfect time to ask you, what grade would you give Sean Desai so far?
I would give him a B-.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors in it, and it starts with me. I got to prepare our guys better and put our guys in better positions to make some plays on those things. And then when I do that and keep shifting the calls and moving them around, putting our guys in good spots so they can challenge those at the point of attack. And credit to them, they did a good job of getting that ball out fast on us.
There's 2 games where we've given up 30-plus points to Sam Howell, who I don't think is as good as Tua. I don't think he's as good as Dak Prescott, who we faced this weekend. So, we got to be a little concerned about some of the pass rush that has not gotten there in some of these games, some of the coverages that have left players open. But overall, I think we can feel that he's been better than Gannon. And I know a lot of people are so worried about the defense overall, and that's, it's the NFL. Offenses are going to have more success than defenses have success for the most part.
Now, I guess it's time to transition to a new game I just invented. All right, first question. Penny or Scott?
I think, I am a Rashad Penny fan, so I would prefer to start Rashad Penny, but he really hasn't gotten any love, and I would sit Boston Scott except for the Giants games.
All right, so let's go biggest draft need for the Eagles, wide receiver or DB?
I do think it's DB, so I would start DB on that one, and I would sit wide receiver in that sort of scenario.
A controversial question, I noticed. Would you go Nakobe Dean or Nicholas Morrow? Watch out, there's a controversial question. People will find you for this. Go ahead.
You're totally right. I mean, Nakobe Dean has been hurt. He hasn't really come into his own. And Morrow has been a standout for the Eagles defense, especially with the pass rush. So as of now, I do think you got to keep the hot hand. And I would start Morrow and sit Dean, which is very tough because, I do think Dean is a more talented player, but maybe he just hasn't found his own in his first year starting.
That right there will get you canceled. I like it. I'll take that answer. All right. So this next one, I think, is a outside corner kind of question. I've been begging for this one. James Bradberry or Eli Ricks on the outside?
Oh, man, you got to start Eli Ricks. That's your boy. That guy, he has performed so well in the limited snaps he's gotten so far. And a lot of people are scared to get him out there just because he was a undrafted free agent, but he has made his presence felt. Those long arms making a difference. He's got that speed to stay on the outside. And Bradberry has been very disappointing for the Eagles this year, coming off of last year's performance.
Yeah, I agree, man. That Bradberry, his contract is looking interesting these days. A bit of a curveball. Let's go Oz or Julio Jones?
Ooh, that's a good question because Julio did make that one that catch on Sunday. I would still go Zaccheaus. I've never been a big, let's get an aging wide receiver out there and get him a ton of reps. But on blocking downs, I think that's when we should use Julio more. He's got bigger size, more strength. I guess in the red zone, you can make the argument for Julio. But I'm still a believer in Zaccheaus. He looked phenomenal in Atlanta once Ridley went down. I do think he's got more skill set and more speed at this age. He just hasn't had the opportunities with the Eagles' weapons around him. So I would say Zaccheaus, but hard to go against Julio. I know I sound like a Julio hater with that tweet when the Eagles signed him, but he's a great player. I just think his best days are behind him.
Jim Schwartz or Sean Desai?
That's a good one. Schwartz got that Super Bowl ring. Desai kind of just getting himself started. I would have to say Schwartz. I mean, he's got a proven track record. If you look at Cleveland this year, what a different team they are overall. Without their starting quarterback, they have P.J. Walker starting out there for them, and they're still putting up great defensive numbers. So I would definitely go Schwartz, feel more of the proven track record over Desai. But Desai can clearly win us over with some big performances down this stretch here. Third
down, Milton Williams or Jordan Davis pass rushing?
I am going to go Milton Williams. I guess it depends on what the third down distance is.
3rd and 10.
3rd and 10, yeah. I would still go Milton. If you're looking for the guy who's going to, cave that defense in, especially the center guard play, that's where your boy Davis is going to make an impact. I do think if you're trying to get the quarterback scrambling, he's going to be scrambling around the pocket. I think that's where Milton Williams kind of succeeds more in his pass rush moves. Longer, third down and long, I definitely think is more Milton Williams territory.
You just passed this test right here. Good job on this game show. That's the second time running that game show. They might flame you for that Morrow and Dean take, but we'll see.
Hey, I'm no rookie to controversial takes.
He is not, actually. That's a great segue into my next segment, actually, Draft Talk. You're actually one of the few people I talk draft talk with that I actually accept it. You've been right more than wrong. I just went over a couple of names. I looked down your TL, and I went over a couple of names you've been right about. Kyle Hamilton, Christian Gonzalez, George Pickens. Definitely right about those names. So you've been on it. Do you have a name right now that you have the same level of confidence in as you did Kyle Hamilton, Christian Gonzalez, that is currently playing in college right now?
Well, I've been specifically kind of scouting stuff for the Eagles in the future. So I guess there's two players. One that will not be an Eagle. I can kind of guarantee that just because of how good he's been playing so far. And then one I kind of hope the Eagles take a chance on. The one I'm most confident in is Keon Coleman, the wide receiver from Florida State. He's no rookie to contested catches. This guy is one-handed everywhere. Every weekend you're going to find him making an insane catch. He does create a little bit of separation, which is obviously needed in the NFL. He reminds me a bit of Pickens. He's not as fierce bulldog like George Pickens was, but he's a route runner. He's got great hands, and he's going to make plays for the NFL. And I really hope he does not go to Washington or to the Giants to impact us. But for one guy that I'm confident in that the Eagles could probably look forward to if they're truly looking to take a guy probably for the future. This guy's name is Talisi Fuaga. He's an Oregon State right tackle. And he has made his presence felt in the run game, in the pass game. He is pretty dominant on that outside for the Beavers. And the Eagles, I think we can safely say they're going to be picking sort of in the bottom half of the first round at this point with the talent they have. And the Eagles, especially Howie, tends to draft for future needs rather than immediate needs. And you kind of take the best player available. You take those athletes like Jordan Davis, like Jalen Carter. The guys are going to make splash plays kind of consistently. And I think Talisi Fuaga is going to be a guy that we're going to be like, how did this guy fall into the late 20s? He's a mauler. He's got the size. He's got strength. You put him on an island, you really never have to worry about him. So I think that's a guy the Eagles can be confident in if they're thinking about drafting offensive tackle, specifically right tackle, for Lane's replacement, because I think a lot of us Eagles fans agree that Jack Driscoll was not it once Lane Johnson went down. And I think the Eagles should prepare for that sort of inevitability sooner rather than later.
Wow. I'm glad I brought you on, because that was, a right tackle. To be scouting right tackles right now requires a level of dedication that most people don't have. So congrats to you, Ian, for scouting that out. I'm going to be paying attention to Oregon State. This is how you came onto my radar. I'm not a huge Pac-12 guy. I'm probably the opposite of a huge Pac-12 guy, but I'm starting to notice things have changed. So I guess this next question is, do you think that the NIL, the fact that money is now involved in colleges, has made college football more competitive?
You can definitely make that argument. Smaller schools that still have the money, they got to put it somewhere. So I do think, I think we're going to see a lot more transfers. Obviously, the last 5 years, we've seen a ton of kids transfer. When you have like Joe Burrow as QB3 on the Ohio State, and then immediately transfers over to LSU and becomes a national champion winning quarterback. That's sort of the name of the game. There's so many weapons and so many top-tier talent players that NIL is going to make a big impact. And players are going to want to, maybe I'll go to a small school, like Utah State, and they're going to pay me $1 million to do this and that and get my starts there. So, there's an option for that to make it more competitive. Because when you think about traditional football, you have the SEC as the powerhouse where every school besides Vanderbilt really is going to, dominate the field, especially the smaller schools at the beginning of the year. But with NIL, you have quarterbacks transferring to schools you'd never think they go to. You got Michael Penix up in Washington. You're like, Washington? Wow, that's sort of a stretch for a top-tier, NFL caliber quarterback. But that's where the money is. So where the players are going to go, where the money is going to find them.
Do you think this made scouting harder or easier?
Good call. I think it makes it a little bit easier because you're going to see a lot more, especially day 2, day 3 players getting repetitions. Because, you have a guy like Bijan Robinson, starting running back for the Texas Longhorns. I know you were a big fan of Bijan going to last year's draft. And then you had Roschon Johnson behind him. And he was getting maybe 15 to 20% of the snaps. And he ends up being a very solid running back for the Bears. And, had Roschon gone to somewhere, I don't know, maybe Kansas, somewhere like a smaller school, still in that same conference, he might have been a higher draft pick just because he would have gotten more repetitions behind, not being stuck kind of behind Bijan Robinson, but actually making his presence known as the starter, essentially, for the Jayhawks. And in this example, where he gets to become the starter in Chicago.
What would you say is the most loaded position coming up in this draft?
So far, I've got to say offensive tackle. I mean, the offensive tackle, these next couple guys coming up are really, really solid. As I was kind of looking around, there was at least 8 guys I saw that were top 40 picks so far. Wow. Which is pretty wild when you think of the NFL coming into using weaponry as you got to have a good running back, solid receivers coming out. But there's a ton of names, Joe Alt, Olu Fashanu from Penn State. Those 2 guys are probably going top 10 at the offensive tackle position. You got J.C. Latham from Alabama, Amarius Mims from Georgia. Those 2 guys are projected top 30 picks, as well as Talisi Fuaga, Jordan Morgan from Arizona, and another guy like Tyler Guyton, another right tackle from Oklahoma. So all those guys right there are projected top 40 picks, and that's pretty wild to think about that because a lot of them are right tackles. So offensive tackle very deep in this draft, which is pretty nice. Also, a couple corners, pretty good. You got Kalen King from Penn State, Dennis Burke from Ohio State. Those guys are making themselves known. Kamari Lassiter from Georgia. If the Eagles are looking for more Bulldogs, Lassiter, another good pick for them on the outside. Amarius Mims, another right tackle the Eagles could really fall in love with as well. So there's a lot of talent. The offensive tackle, Cooper DeJean, obviously making his name known at Iowa as well as a returner, not only just a cornerback but also a returner as well. So there are some deep positions sort of going into this draft as well.
Hey, man, I appreciate you putting me on all these names here, and I hope the listeners are listening to this too, because this man knows his stuff. So that's a good list of me to check out, and the college season is still going. So thank you, appreciate you. How would you rank this last draft class against, let's say, the last 10 years?
The 2023 overall class or the Eagles class?
2023 Eagles class specifically.
Man, it's hard to beat that 2018 class with Goddard, Maddox, Josh Sweat kind of coming out. But the Eagles, getting Jalen Carter at number 9 is always a home run for any sort of draft class. I know a lot of people were thinking he was going to be, a top 5 pick, and falling all the way down to sort of what we guess we could call Howie range. We got to be very excited about it. And then the Eagles have that other first round pick, thankfully from the Saints, and they grabbed my boy Nolan Smith from Georgia as well. He was a guy I'm super high on. I know the Eagles haven't really used him enough. I think this last weekend he had 4 snaps, which is not great, but I think he'll come into his own, especially into year 2. As the Eagles, they draft for future needs rather than immediate needs. I know Tyler Steen is someone you're very high on. When he came in for that the end of the second quarter when Opeta was out, he made himself very, very known. No pressures. He looked with the day one starter out there. That was very impressive with Tyler Steen. Sidney Brown making himself known as the big hitter in the Eagles secondary. One of the best run stoppers. I mean, he had 2 tackles for loss in the first half alone last weekend. I do think Ringo, I know he was the first pick on day 3 for the Eagles. He has not made his presence felt on defense just yet. And I know he's more of a special teams contributor, but he's done well there. We'll see if the Eagles kind of use him or they're still kind of training him up to be a replacement for Bradbury Slay in the future. And Tanner McKee, I mean, it's hard to argue that he's not QB2 over Mariota at this point with his performance in the preseason where he was carving teams up. So that was pretty impressive. And then getting Moro Ojomo, that defensive tackle from Texas, as the last pick, man, that's just insane value because I think he could potentially be a DT3 on a lot of teams, maybe even DT2. So he's kind of buried behind a really good a group of defensive tackles. But should ever someone go down, he will be ready to step up as well. So I think this might be, obviously it's early, it's the first season with them. This could be the best draft class they've had in the last decade for sure.
Yeah, and I have the similar thoughts. This is a very, very exciting draft class. I like that you broke them all down. I agree with all of them, especially the Texas guy, number 7. I was watching him for a while. I do love that Eli Ricks pick, obviously. Ringo needs to get on the field, but his special teams work, like you said, is doing some things, so that's cool. Is there any specific player that has jumped out at you this year, offense or defense?
I think we got to be really excited about DeAndre Swift. I think the Eagles going from Miles Sanders, who a lot of people kind of overvalued and a lot of people undervalued. He was definitely sort of in the middle. And then you get a weapon like DeAndre Swift for a day 3 draft pick. And that's where Howie really works his magic, where we need to appreciate Howie more. Is he goes and sees the Lions take Jahmyr Gibbs, they sign David Montgomery in the offseason, and now they don't have a need for DeAndre Swift. He's kind of going out the door. Well, let me throw a late-round pick here, and he becomes sort of a star running back for the Eagles behind our offensive line. He's, even in the pass game, you probably saw those cuts this weekend, and he was taking some Commanders defensive players' ankles on those cuts. That the fake brotherly shove touchdown he had there, he tends to hit the holes that Miles Sanders missed. I think that's a big thing that has changed with the Eagles' offense this year. Miles always wanted to bounce it outside, and you can see Swift cutting through the middle, finding those lanes behind Kelsey, behind Dickerson, finding the way to kind of get through and get those extra 2-3 yards that Sanders would try to bounce outside and end up being a 2-yard loss. So I think Swift has been the guy that has really made the biggest impact on this team so far.
Love Swift. I'm so surprised we got him. Do you think the Eagles are able to re-sign him?
That's a good question, and that all kind of falls down to, does Howie want to re-sign a running back to another contract? And in the NFL, it's a smart business to kind of use the players up and then draft someone in the 3rd or 4th to kind of replace them. Do they feel confident in, giving Penny more snaps in the future? Where do we see, Gainwell in the future for the Eagles as well? He's more of a passing back rather than sort of like a goal line running back. I would say the Eagles probably do not re-sign DeAndre Swift, and that's going to be tough for a lot of people to kind of consider. It's just sort of Howie's MO, As we know how, he doesn't do certain things, and one of those is not signing running backs to big money contracts. He saves that for the offensive and defensive line, which so far has worked out well for the Eagles. It tends to be pretty good business. So I would not hate the re-signing of DeAndre Swift, but I would say for big money, it would be a tough pill to swallow with sort of the needs the Eagles will have, especially with Devontae's extension coming up. They'll need a Dickerson extension coming up in the future as well. And then even for Jordan Davis, who's made his impact in year 2, they'll have to start thinking about him and Jalen Carter for the future, for their money. So I don't think they're going to sign DeAndre Swift again.
Who do you think the best player on the offense is right now?
I got to go A.J. Brown. I mean, his impact in this offense is undeniable. When you have, Jalen Hurts obviously has the ball in his hand on every play, and you can easily go, QB1 as the most important guy. But when you have, a guy who now has the NFL record for 6 games, 125 yards receiving every one of these games, you got to admit this guy is an MVP candidate this year. He makes his presence felt on the outside so often, so easily. He's pretty much unguardable. His Twitter handle is 1K always open because you can't stop this guy. So I do think his impact, especially in games where the Eagles are trailing by double digits and getting back in the game, AJ makes a huge difference to kind of bring the offense to life.
Who would you say the biggest, or who would you say the best player on defense would be?
This is where I got to eat crow. I got to go Jordan Davis. I think coming into year 2 for him, year 1 he was hampered by his injuries. He started out well, but up until that Arizona game, and he didn't really make his presence felt. This training camp offseason, he started to develop some pass rush moves. I think that was one knock I had on him coming into the draft, where he was a top 15 pick, is he was more of a run-stuffing nose tackle that kind of opened up the lanes for Jalen Carter, for Trayvon Walker. And I think he's really kind of found those pass rush moves from his teammates and has absolutely dominated the offensive line in moments where the Eagles need him, on big third downs, on second downs and short, turning them into third down and long. Jordan Davis, absolutely home run this year so far.
Wow, that was a surprising answer right there. I must say, we're definitely going to clip that because that was a very surprising answer, sir.
I gotta admit when I'm wrong. If I'm gonna take the credit when I'm right, I gotta say Jordan Davis has proved me wrong.
I will say this. You were right about Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton was not a bad pick. I was very harsh on Kyle Hamilton. He's actually been playing really well for what he does. Great player. So you were right about that too. So I'll give you that. I guess we pretty much have this wrapped up here. Ian, is there anything else I forgot to ask that you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered, I know I'm pretty long-winded with some of these answers, so I would say I think we covered quite a bit with it.
No, you did great. You did great, sir. All right, so go ahead and drop your handle so people can find you.
People can find me on Twitter at LeanHamNeeson, or just find my name, Ian. I'm on there. I'm hanging around Hollywood J here talking about our Eagles.
He sure is. He's a Twitter vet. I tell the people that's where to go. That's where you'll find us. So again, thank you for stopping by, Ian. I appreciate you. I'm glad we linked up, finally talked. I've known you for forever now, so this was cool to talk football with you and figure out where your mind is on this. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Once again, appreciate you, brother, and take it easy, Ian.
Same with you, Hollywood J. See you later, man.
And that was Ian. Once again, thank you to Ian for stopping by. I appreciate you, brother. Ian has definitely been on Twitter for like 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer, and we've been watching this team evolve over time. So that was very good to reconnect with Ian. Thank you for stopping by, brother. I appreciate you. Very smart. The man knows his stuff about college. He's watching college every Saturday. He's watching prospects. Right around March, February, right in there is when we really start chatting about our favorite prospects, where we really start like digging into who we want and how nobody else is better than the player we want. And that's where we get into these fun little debates. And it was great to bring him on because we've definitely been through a few debates ourselves. So good to see you, Ian. I appreciate you, brother. You are the man. And thank y'all for tuning in to the listeners. Once again, you can reach me at _. Once again, that is _. Thank you to all my guests who's been on the show so far. We're going to bring you guys back for our bye-week special coming up after the Cowboys game. Hopefully we win that, so it's just good times. Thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate you guys. You guys have a great rest of your week. Let's go Birds, baby.